Hello, everyone. Welcome to A Child Like Me. This morning, I have a very special guest. Her name is Mrs. Allison, and she's going to be sharing with us the story of her daughter, Kacy Allison, who was diagnosed with Reye's syndrome. No, I know for me, I did not know anything about Reye's syndrome before Mrs. Allison shared the story with me. And I can assume that many of you viewers have never heard of Reye's syndrome. So we're going to find out today what this syndrome is and what the dangers are, the complications that can result. Mrs. Allison, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, and I know that this is a very sad story for you. You lost your toddler. How many years ago was this?
Well, Casey would have been 30 years old now. She'll be
No.
31 in September come.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this was in 1994.
Four. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this happened 30 years ago. Kacy was 2 months
No,
old.
she was 10 months old,
10
almost
months
10
old.
months old. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Mm-hmm.
So I can imagine and accept my condolences. I can
Thank
just
you.
imagine what it has been like for you, because I'm sure that wound is still fresh,
Mm-hmm.
right? It never goes away. So I'm going to allow Mrs. Allison to just share with us the story of Kacy.
Well, as I said, Casey was born. She'll be 30 years old today. This year, because she was born in September 29, 1993.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a very healthy baby. She became fat and very cute and nice, and all the developments, walking, talking,
Mm-hmm.
everything was normal. But we used to send her to the daycare center, and when she was 9.5 months old, took her from the daycare center one evening, and noticed that she had a little fever and she had a little rash,
Mm-hmm.
and she got over it, and she seemed to be healthy because it's like we carried her to the doctor, and the doctor said it was like a virus she picked up.
Mm-hmm.
But a week later, she started getting sick again. She got fever, terrible, terrible fever. She had a cold, and she seemed to be in pain because she was always crying, crying, crying. Took her to the doctor. Doctor gave her, she had diarrhea as well. The doctor gave her um, children's Panadol, and she also got this substance called chiopectate, which is for diarrhea. She had
Mm-hmm.
diarrhea, bad, bad, bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave her the chiopectate, which is a white substance. It's like Dica or any Pepto-Bismol, but it's white.
Mm-hmm.
And she seemed to be doing okay with the diarrhea and seemed to be coming along. Then all of a sudden, she just started like screaming sometimes, and at night she refused to sleep. She wouldn't sleep, and she didn't start to stop taking her feeding, and she just got worse. So one morning I rushed her to the doctor. The doctor said carry her to the hospital because the fever was 106 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 106 degrees Fahrenheit, which I said it would start to cause, what do you call it, convulsions if I wasn't careful.
Right.
And she had diarrhea, awful, awful diarrhea, and diarrhea was not pleasant smelling.
Mm-hmm.
So when I took her to the hospital, they pushed her right away into a crib, and she was holding onto the crib, stand up holding onto the crib and screaming, and the nurses were saying, why is she screaming like that? Why is, it's like it's not normal the way she was going on. And eventually, because I had two other children, I had to leave her there at the hospital overnight. And when I went back the following day to check on her, I heard that she was in X-ray. And X-ray, why? They just couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. Then she ended up in ICU because they also did have spinal tap to find out if it was meningitis. It was not meningitis.
Mm-hmm.
And she ended up in ICU on ventilator, drip, tubes coming out in and out her nose, her nostrils, her, you know, eventually her father had to come with me to the ICU. We had to wear mesh
Mm-hmm.
caps and gloves and gowns, and she was in a really bad way. So it seemed that if her heart was beating, that was within a space of 3 years, 3 days, her
Mm-hmm.
heart was beating, but her brain function was gone.
Okay.
And when you put your hand on her forehead, it was cold, 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 cold. So it's it was an experience. And eventually, the doctors couldn't find out what it was. They didn't know what it was. And I was doing some research. At the time, we didn't have Google, but I was reading up some encyclopedia and books. And I
Mm-hmm.
wondered if it might have been this thing called Reye syndrome. But I didn't say anything to the doctor. And the specialist, I remember her name was Dr. Brown. She said to me, she think it could be Reye syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And but eventually I couldn't do anything about it because it was too far gone.
Okay.
And she ended up being taken off the ventilator after 5 days in the ICU. And she, I got the notice that she had passed away 11:45 that morning. I'll never forget, 16th of June 1994.
Mm-hmm.
And she was post-mortem. They did an autopsy, and I found out that it was in fact Reye syndrome that she had had. Because according to them, it swells the brain, it
Mm-hmm.
makes the liver enlarge and get pale, and it shuts down all your organs after a while.
Okay.
So it usually happens after the child has had a virus and gotten better for
Mm-hmm.
some reason, but I think also it's related to having aspirin, being given aspirin,
Mm-hmm.
painkiller,
Yeah.
and she shouldn't have been prescribed the chiropectate by the doctor because it had aspirin, which is salicylic acid.
Oh, it has aspirin in
Yes,
it.
yes,
Okay.
salicylic acid, which is
Mm-hmm.
so. I blame myself. I shouldn't really because I didn't know at the time. Blame myself for giving her the chiropectic that the doctor
But
recommended.
you wouldn't have
I
known,
wouldn't have
you
known.
know?
But she she Reye syndrome is, let's say, is affected by salicylic acid.
Okay.
It gets worse.
So I'd pronounce it raise. So it's
Rise.
rise,
It's
rise.
either way. It can
It's
be
either
rise
way.
or raise.
Okay. And is the aspirin or the salicylic acid the only trigger or the only thing associated with getting Reye
I
syndrome?
guess it depends, because if we had known earlier, would have gotten her treated, like gotten her on trip earlier and stuff. But
Okay.
because we thought it was just a little
Right.
virus, or
Did you reach out back to her physician
the
who
one
had
that prescribed the
prescribed it?
chiropractic.
Yes.
You know what? Did I? Yes, I did. I
Hmm.
did.
What
But
was the response?
um, you know, it's so long ago I can't remember. I
Hmm.
can't remember. But I remember being very angry with him.
Yeah.
hmm
I'm wondering if that's a typical treatment that would have been given, and she just happened to have a different reaction to it,
Yeah.
or if it's not a typical
No, they
treatment.
say that for the diarrhea, he should have just given her electrolyte
Mm-hmm.
fluids and treat it like how he normally treat that. But it was so bad that he gave her
Mm-hmm.
thiopectate, which is for diarrhea. But children shouldn't, children under 12 shouldn't have had thiopectate.
Right. But that sounds like something that you could have followed up,
Mm-hmm.
probably even
Yeah.
taken to court.
Yes. Yeah. But
Yeah.
with these medical issues,
Yes.
doctors will
It's a
take up
high
for
hill
each
to
other.
climb. It's a
Yeah.
high
Yeah.
hill to climb.
Mm-hmm.
And situations like the common cold or even the flu
Mm-hmm.
and diarrhea and fevers, I'm not a medical practitioner, but from my knowledge as a mother and someone who has done research on it, these are conditions that the body just has to flush it out.
Right.
The body
Right.
just has to ride out the
Right.
fever,
Mm-hmm.
ride out the diarrhea.
Mm-hmm.
A viral infection, there's pretty much nothing you can do
Mm-hmm.
but allow it to run its
Right. Right.
course,
So maybe
right?
rehydration and
Right,
electrolytes would have been a better treatment
right.
than the antidiarrheal medication, which was
Hmm.
thiopectate.
Right. You know, as a mother, I know that the child has diarrhea, you just have to ensure that you, as you said, you rehydrate,
Mm-hmm.
keep the child hydrated. You can do things to reduce the fever, but as I'm going to read to you, because I'm going to read in a little while from the National Reye Syndrome Foundation, the facts and dangers of the syndrome. But the fever can actually be a positive thing, which indicates that the body is dealing with the infection and getting rid of whatever is there, right? So you said an autopsy was done,
Yes.
and that's when it was concluded that it was Reye syndrome.
Yeah.
um did you where is she buried?
In Ashley District, Clarendon, in a family plot,
Okay,
the
so that's
Allison
where
family
you're
plot.
originally from.
That's where my husband is
In,
originally from.
okay.
Moko and Clarendon. But
Okay, that's far up
mm-hmm.
in the hills.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How did you cope though? This devastating news that you have lost your child. What were your immediate reactions, and how did you cope?
Well, I, I didn't want to live. Let's put it that
I
way.
can well imagine.
But the two children I had,
Mm-hmm.
Andrew and Melissa, I lived for them afterwards.
How
So
old were they?
Andrew was 9 and Melissa was 6.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad they were around. And the father was very, very, very supportive and helpful.
Yes, I was
So,
about to ask
mhm,
too. How did he cope?
yeah. Well, he coped by not saying anything, or he just went along with life as if they never mentioned her.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the years following, if he mentioned her 3 times, he mentioned her a lot.
Oh my.
But I know
Mm-hmm.
she was always in his mind. So that
That
was how he
dads
coped.
tend to hold it
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
because I guess he's feeling, well, he has to be strong for
For me,
you and the
yes,
other kids.
yes. I remembered he had to call in a helper because all the buckles, all the clothes, everything was just all over the place. I just didn't want. I lost about 50 pounds.
Oh my.
I was just, and then we moved from, we were living off Happy Park Road and we moved to Greater Portmore
Mm-hmm.
a week later.
Okay.
So it
Is
was
what was that the main reason why you moved? You felt like you needed to be in another
both
space?
because we had just gotten through with the house
Okay.
in Greater Portmore and we were glad not to be at
Be
the same
there.
residence where she had.
So you were giving
Mhm.
away her baby stuff.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Do you think this affected you not having any other kids?
Well, at the time,
Mhm.
when after I had Kacy, everybody was saying, "Oh, time's hard. You need to get, you need to get a tie off." So I don't have any more. And that's what I did, and then I regretted it.
Oh, okay. So
So
you would have wanted to have
I
more.
would have wanted.
Mhm.
But I went and got a tie off because everybody was saying you need to get a tie off. Three
Sometimes people
children.
should just mind their own
Yes,
business, right?
yes.
Leave people alone to
Yeah.
decide. I mean, you can, especially if it's a younger person, yes, you
Mm-hmm.
can offer advice,
Yeah.
yes. But there are just some people who they have no ties to you,
Mm-hmm.
they have no reason other than them fast,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to dictate to you how many kids you must have. If
Mm-hmm.
you can afford it, if
Yeah.
you assess your situation and you can afford it, that is up to you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you visit her often?
No, I have not been there in since 2014, which
Mm-hmm.
was when her great great uncle died at age of 100 years old in
Okay, so
Mokko.
that's when you went.
Yes,
Okay, prior to that, did you visit her
yes,
often?
yes. Her father would carry us down there on trips. I would
Okay.
visit the grave because the grave is beside his father as well, his
Mm-hmm.
father's grave.
How did
So,
the two siblings deal with it?
wow, they were really miss the sister.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the 6 year old, she kind of didn't remember, you know, she kind of didn't remember things as much as it affected the 9 year old more.
Mm-hmm.
I used to help with her and carry her around and feed her, and so
So this is Kacy
yes, two
at two
months.
months old.
Yes,
Okay.
I think the sun was in her eyes at the time. Mm,
And this would be her sister
yes.
holding her.
Hmm.
So her sister was 6 here.
Yes. No, well, not quite 6. Was she
Mm-hmm.
quite 6?
Maybe
The
five something.
both of them were born in September, so
Okay.
she would almost be 6. Yeah.
Almost 6. Did they ask you where's Kacy? When is she coming home? What kind of
Yes, yes, definitely, definitely. And say, what
mm-hmm.
to do with the baby? Where's the baby? What to do with her? Cause
And what did you tell? How
the
did you I mean, because they are so young, you have to find a way to tell them so they know the reality, but
but
still
the thing about it is, when we went to the hospital, they came with me. So when she was being admitted, they were there.
okay.
Yeah.
They were
So
allowed at the
they
hospital.
were like in the waiting area.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. So they
So and then they never really saw her
her
again
again.
after
Right,
that,
right. Hmm.
right? So when they were at the funeral, I can just imagine they were at the funeral, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And a big funeral. All of our co-workers from both my husband's workplace and my workplace.
Mm-hmm.
That big um bus came, bus loads of people, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, country funerals.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So I'm going to. I have some information I want to share. I should have some information I want to share from. Going to be reading from this pamphlet. Your Child and Rise Syndrome, the Facts and the Dangers, and it's from the Rise Syndrome Foundation, National Rise Syndrome Foundation of UK. All right, so this is very important information because listen, I didn't know that there was even such a thing, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys out there have never heard of Rise Syndrome. So I'm going to read it so we can know what to look for and you know how to avoid, because it can be helped, right?
Mm. Yes, yeah.
You can recover from it.
Yes. Depends on the stage
The
at which you
stage, right? You
take
can
it.
recover from it. All right. So it says, what is Reye syndrome? Reye syndrome is an acute disorder, right? So it's not chronic. It's not something that the individual is going to be having over months or years. It's acute. It just comes
Mm-hmm.
on, and it typically affects children when they seem to be recovering from a viral illness like the flu, chickenpox, or diarrhea. The child has a change in his or her personality, or becomes drowsy or unconscious, and develops frequent or persistent vomiting. And what does Reye syndrome do to children? Unless it is diagnosed and treated successfully, death or severe disability may result. Abnormal accumulations of fat develop in the liver and some other organs of the body, along with a severe increase of pressure in the brain. Who can get Reye syndrome? The disease affects children from infancy onwards. It is rarely recognized after 19 years of age. It strikes children of both sexes and all races. What causes Reye syndrome? The cause is unknown, but a number of studies suggest a link between the development of Reye syndrome and the use of aspirin to treat the viral illness which precedes it. These studies do not prove that aspirin causes Reye syndrome, but may aggravate it. Other chemical substances, including insecticides and emulsifiers, have also been implicated, but the evidence that these are involved is controversial. There is no need to use aspirin for feverish illnesses in children. Because of the possible link with Reye syndrome, all aspirin preparations are labeled with the warning, do not give to children under 12 unless your doctor tells you to. Right, and this is very important that we note this, right? Are these lasting effects? Survival is related to the severity of the swelling of the brain. Some children recover completely, others may sustain slight to severe permanent brain damage. All children surviving Reye syndrome require follow up with developmental assessments. What can I do if my child has a fever and I cannot use aspirin? Fever is a normal response to infection. It may actually help your child to fight off viral illness. If you feel you must do something, there are a number of non drug actions which may be taken. Excess covering and clothes should be removed. Sponge or bathe the child with warm water. This will often induce sleep. Keep the room at a moderate temperature. Encourage the child to drink liquids such as water or non-fizzy soft drinks. If the fever does not respond to these measures, obtain advice from your doctor. And remember, children under 12 months of age who have fever should not be treated without medical advice, right? And the pamphlet goes on to say we are to remember that Reye syndrome can appear soon after a viral infection, a flu-like infection, or chickenpox. Early signs of Reye syndrome are continuous vomiting, listlessness, loss of energy, drowsiness, irritability, aggressiveness, confusion, and irrational behavior. So any of these symptoms you notice in your infant or toddler or even an older child, you have to watch their behavior and how they respond to you and how they respond to others and see if there are any changes like these. Medicines can mask the symptoms. Therefore, if a child develops any of the symptoms of Reye syndrome, parents should not give the child anti-nausea or fever-reducing medicine. The general practitioner should be phoned immediately. Abnormal liver function tests strongly suggests a diagnosis of Reye's syndrome. Inherited metabolic disorders can present with a Reye's-like illness, especially in children under 4 years. It is essential to diagnose them because of implications for genetic counseling, specific treatment, and investigation of other children in the family. And it is emphasized that early diagnosis and appropriate treatment is vital, right? It is very important that you notice these. So many are rare genetic disorders of the body. Chemistry metabolic disorders are now known to cause an illness indistinguishable from Reye's syndrome. And this possibility must be considered immediately and appropriate investigation arranged. The early treatment of these Reye-like illnesses is similar but very specific, and specialized investigations are required to make certain that such disorders are excluded, right? And what are the early stages of Reye syndrome? Persistent or continuous vomiting, and or signs of brain dysfunction such as listlessness, loss of energy, drowsiness, personality changes, irritability, aggressive behavior, disorientation. The child might look confused or exhibit irrational behavior, delirium, convulsions. Reye's syndrome should be suspected if a child displays all or part of this pattern of symptoms a few days after the onset of viral illness such as the flu or chickenpox, and fever is not usually present, right? Many diseases have similar features, so you just have to be vigilant and consult your general practitioner, especially if it's an infant, right? The older kids might be able to deal with some of the symptoms better, but when we're dealing with infants, toddlers, you really have to be on your feet, and you have to be quick to act. That's the important thing. Quick action. What can I do if my child has a fever and I cannot? Oh, I read that already. All right. So this I really wanted to. I'm really glad, Mrs. Allison, that you were able to come and talk to us about this, because it's so little known and the effect can be so devastating. Um, I wanted to ask, do you ever, I mean, I guess this is a natural thing, but do you ever sit and wonder what she would have been like?
Definitely,
You know,
definitely. But even like
what she would have
yeah,
been?
like our brother and sister, we know. I said
Mm-hmm.
maybe she'd be the
Be
one
the
who
one to
stayed home
stay
with
with
me.
you. Mm-hmm.
And you know
As the
what
youngest.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. What should have looked like, and her personality and everything. So sometimes it helps to think about it, and other times it makes it down, you know.
Yeah.
But
Has it affected your views on even dealing with your grandkids? Has it made you more protective?
definitely,
You find that
yeah, I
the
try to do
least
the
little
right
thing,
thing. Yeah,
yeah,
I try, and I think I spoil them. Of course, our grandchildren are spoiled, but
the grandparents do
yeah,
tend to overdo it.
yeah,
But you think that this has made you be more vigilant
vigilant. Yeah,
and more
mm-hmm,
cautious?
mm-hmm. And on the bad side, it makes me more anxious.
Yeah.
You know, but
So it's like even some things which are simple,
mm-hmm,
you're just anxious about it.
yeah, and say, wow, could that be
Mm-hmm.
a symptom of whatever? You know.
And you find
So
that this spills over into like when you see other parents dealing with their kids, you does it make you want to offer advice and to say
yeah, yeah,
check it
check
out
it out.
because
Yes,
Well, again, I want to say, my condolences.
Thank
I
you.
I do not ever wish to be in a position of losing a child, and I don't wish that on anyone. I can just imagine what it is like, you know. So, yesterday, I made a post on social media. I was revising something about Marcus Garvey, right? And so Garvey's parents had 11 of them,
Wow.
11 kids, and only two survived to become adults.
Really?
Only Garvey and one of his sister made it. All nine,
Died in
the other
infancy.
nine died as infants.
Wow.
And I made a post and I was saying, my goodness, can you imagine losing nine of your babies?
Mm-hmm.
I
So he was
mean,
the oldest, or
he wasn't the oldest, but he was well, I think he was one of the last ones.
oh,
Yeah, he was
wow.
one of the later ones. But only he and a sister survived.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just reflecting and said, what I mean, these things, we know that the infant mortality was high back then,
Yes.
right? Both infant and maternal
Mm-hmm.
mortality were high. But then you said, my goodness, you have nine kids,
Yeah.
you lose nine kids.
I know the infant mortality not getting it. It's like it's always high. 'Cause even
With
when
the improvements in
yeah when I'm
so you're
yeah,
saying, even with the advancement in medication
mm-hmm.
and procedures,
Yes,
you
because
still
I hear
think
it
it's
on the
high?
news every now and then, especially
Mm-hmm.
premature babies.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to the morgue, the hospital morgue at Children's to look at her, I was shocked to see how many other babies were there,
Mm-hmm.
children and so on. And no,
But
it's
it's not something we hear about. You feel like it's
mm-hmm.
being hushed.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Because even the case of my daughter Kacy, I'm thinking, was it a fact that a matter of them taking her off the ventilator without telling me, or did she actually expire while on the ventilator? I
Mm-hmm.
never did find out.
Yeah.
So,
And it's kind of the arrogance of these medical practitioners
mm-hmm.
too. Sometimes they feel they know best,
Yes, yes,
you know, and
mm-hmm.
they have the power to
Yes,
prescribe and the power to intervene
mm-hmm.
with procedures that are sometimes not even necessary,
Yes, or
right?
experimental.
Experimental,
So, there's a
but
lot
it's
behind the
it's really
scenes.
difficult. Yeah, it's really difficult because back then women typically had 12, 13 kids,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them died.
Died.
My grandma had what, 11,
Mm-hmm.
and two died as infants. Her sister had, I think her sister had six and two died, if I'm not mistaken. So it was kind of expected. But my God, to lose nine,
Mm-hmm.
I was just sitting and thinking, what could she have, how she cope?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this thing about Garvey's dad, Marcus Garvey's dad, that he was like very introverted and he would just lock himself into his
Mm-hmm.
library. And
Opposite of Marcus himself.
well, he loved to read like
Mm-hmm.
Marcus,
Mm-hmm.
but opposite in terms of, 'cause Marcus was
Yeah,
definitely
right,
extroverted,
right.
but he would shut himself away and he would
Mm-hmm.
be a kind of
Recluse.
recluse
Mm-hmm.
and not very sociable. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if that affects, because as we
Must
said,
have,
the
yes.
males
They
tend to hold it
internalize it,
in.
yes.
And there was a
Mm-hmm.
situation where it said at one point, um, Garvey's dad, he dug graves because he was a mason.
Mm-hmm.
So he was digging the grave, somebody's grave, and Garvey was there helping him.
Mm-hmm.
And when Garvey was down there, his dad pulled out the ladder
Mm-hmm.
and just leave Garvey there for the night
What?
to build this, that based on a documentary that I watched. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if it's really happened,
Mm-hmm.
but a bio of Garvey, he left him there to toughen him up and to make him not be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe things like, maybe it's how the deaths of his nine kids.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering these things because
Mm-hmm.
we really don't know how deep these
Mm-hmm.
things affect us,
Yes.
right? But I'm happy that you found a way. The pain will always be there,
Mm-hmm.
but you found a way to still carry on. As you said, your other two kids gave you that impetus
Mm-hmm.
and that strength to live for them, to
Yes.
keep living for them. And now we have your grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
How
And
many grandkids do you have?
just Kali and her sister
So you
Tash.
have two,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but at the same time, some of them don't know how to cope, and they take it out on even
Yes,
the
and I
other
don't
kids.
realize that anger and depression and
Mm-hmm.
frustration is a part of that
The
emotion.
grieving
Yes.
process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have to allow our men to grieve. We have to allow them to feel sad and to express that they are sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because these things affect them. And
Yeah.
yes, we want them to be strong. Um, but being strong don't mean you can't go through grief or you can't express
Mm-hmm.
sadness. It don't have to be one or the other. At the end of the day, we're all humans,
Right.
and these things we go through, this is a part of life,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to help each other to cope, right? So, are there any words of encouragement you'd like to give, not just to parents who have lost kids to Reye syndrome, but any parent who has lost a child? What would you say?
Life goes on. So just cherish the memories and hold them dear to your chest. But
Mm,
life does go on, so we have to go on living life.
yeah, I
So,
remember when my
and prayer.
brother, yeah, I remember when my brother was murdered,
Oh.
and at his funeral, my mom nearly threw herself into the coffin into the grave,
Mm,
and she was just so distraught and just so she pretty much wanted to join
mm-hmm,
him in the whole,
mm-hmm,
right? And I remember years after, cause that was like 20 odd years ago,
mm-hmm,
right? I heard my mom laughing. Somebody give her a joke or she give herself a joke
mm-hmm.
because she's like that. And just hearing her laughter, I said to myself, I'm sure there was a point when my mother thought she would never laugh
Laugh
again.
again.
I'm
Mm-hmm,
sure after she lost her son, it was her only son,
mm-hmm,
her youngest and her only son. I'm sure she had told herself, it's not possible
mm-hmm,
for me to even laugh again. And there she was just laughing. It's not
mm-hmm,
that she had stopped grieving, because she never stopped grieving.
mm-hmm,
On his birthday, on Mother's Day,
mm-hmm.
certain special days, she still cries. She
Mm-hmm.
still, it's gonna hurt, but
Yes.
you can laugh
Mm-hmm.
again, you can love again.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't stop you from doing
Yes.
these
And
things.
music and prayer. Music and prayer
Those help
helps
you.
me a lot.
Hmm.
I remember once I was sitting listening to Jimmy Cliff's song. Um, well, I was listening to the song last night. I know it slipped me, but I was listening to this song he was singing, and it's like I can see clearly now the
Yeah.
pain has gone, and
Mm.
it's like something just sprung out of me. Like it's like a, a starburst. It's like
Mm.
right away I just felt the depression and the down feelings just come out of me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, I definitely know that song. I played for
Mm-hmm.
my students.
All
Um,
of the bad feelings have
have
disappeared.
disappeared. Right.
Oh
There is
boy.
that rainbow I've
I've been
been
sweet.
waiting
It's
for.
gonna be a bright, sunshiny
Yes,
day.
I really love that
Yeah.
song.
And
So,
I prayed to God. And after, because at first I said, why is there, why would he do this?
yes,
If,
especially
if
for
we,
an infant.
right, right. And then afterwards, you stop believing in God. And then afterwards, you come right back. You come
Mm.
right back because you realize there is a creator who created us. And there's a reason for everything.
So for a
So,
short while, it challenged your faith.
yeah.
Were you a very religious
No,
person?
no. The
Are
nearest
you
I've
now?
the nearest I've come to is when I used to go to Better Baptist Church, and I was in a class where you I think they call it beginners class, where you study the Bible and things like that to become baptized, to get
Mm,
baptized. But I didn't. I went to about three of those classes and I never got baptized.
okay. But you did believe in a higher power,
Yes, I do.
and you
I
felt
do.
like you could, it's like you were saying, it doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
Because you see, especially when it happens to children,
Mhm.
it's like you're saying, why? What has this child done?
Yeah.
You know?
But there's this poem by Edgar Guess.
Mm,
A child of I lend you a child for a while. It's a child of mine.
yeah.
Yes. Every time I read it, I cry. It's like it's saying God is giving him for a while for you to take care of until he calls that child back.
Mm-hmm.
So that helped as well. Poem and I wrote poems. I wrote a lot of poems.
Mm-hmm.
So that
And I know
helped.
you kept a journal
Journal,
also
yes. So that
of,
helped.
right. So viewers, you can look out for another video that I'm going to do, a follow up, where I'm going to share with you Mrs. Allison's journal that she kept for Kacy during her, was it prior to her illness as well, or
No,
just for the illness and
for the illness and
and
after.
after?
Mm.
Right. So I'm going to do another video and share with you Mrs. Allison's thoughts as Kacy was going through her illness and eventually losing her. You reached out to the, what was the name of the raise, the National Raise Syndrome
Syndrome.
Foundation.
UK.
What made you reach out to them, and what did you hope to achieve? What did you say to
Yes, I
them?
wanted to know more about the illness and, you know, because it's so rare.
Mm,
I was very curious to know how come it's if it's real, how come it affected my child,
yeah.
and to know if other parents might, experience the same thing. I think knowledge is power.
Right.
So
What was their response?
the Reye Syndrome
Mm,
Foundation, they were very sympathetic because the person who was in charge at the time, his son had died from
yes.
the illness, and they were interested in knowing more about the illness. So I haven't done any Google search.
Mm-hmm.
Since
In
Google
more
come, I
recent
haven't.
times,
Yes, I
yeah.
haven't done. I haven't done. I should to see
Mm,
how far advanced they are in the
yeah.
research.
I wonder how
Yeah.
prevalent it is here in
Mm-hmm.
Jamaica.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting to
Should be
know as well.
interesting.
Okay. All right. So we're wrapping up now. I want to thank you again, Mrs. Allison, for coming to share your stories. Very important that we share these stories and spread the information and offer support and offer hope to others. All right. So until next time, when we talk with another interesting guest, thank you also, viewers, for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video.